Well, hello everyone. I'm Dr. Ed Brown, actually a professor at Alabama State University. Let me tell you just a little bit about myself before I start and maybe why I'm doing this. Because the first question probably come up is that why should you even be listening to me about anything? And that's the question I would have if I saw me on tape. First, let me just talk a little bit about what I do here at Alabama State, and then I want to give you a little bit historical background about me and then get right into the topic there that we're discussing. I've been teaching at Alabama State now, actually, since about 1999. I was over here as what was called the ROTC, a recruiting commander on the campus. And during that time, I did a little adjunct, and the adjunct work was in the area of management, business, under an icon for our university here, Dean Vaughn. I did that for several years and then finally decided to work on my doctorate, got my doctorate, and came on full-time on the staff. What I've taught here since I've been here, I've taught courses in the area of human resources management, which is our 400 level course, that which probably one of the stellar courses when you talk about getting jobs on the outside and understanding how organizations work and the behind-the-scene legal aspects of it, which is an excellent course. I've taught organizational behavior, which gets involved in the area of looking at how the mindset, how managers think, how marketing people think, what strategies they use from a mental standpoint. You're probably familiar with some of the things like Maslow and Hirschberg's theories, those kinds of things, but all of that. And I'm not going to get real academic with this because this is about entrepreneurship. And to me, it's about the rubber hitting the road. But I just want to give you a little bit of background about me. And as I talk about things, you may understand why I bring those things out in the process of my discussion here. Now, my favorite course, really, and I say favorite because it is really a pivotal course when you talk about management, is a course called Principles of Management. It's a 300 level course. That course deals with the very basics of management all the way to understanding how do you really become a manager. And that's what I'm going to hit on a lot here, and probably you're going to see yourselves in a lot of what I talk about and probably see that maybe you're already doing a lot of those things already. Another course that I teach that I really like is at the graduate level. I also teach a course in the Master of Accountancy program. It's one on management diversity and also for the management communications course. And if I would back up just a little bit, I've also taught 200 level courses. I've taught the economics courses and both the 200 levels and the 254 levels where we're talking about basic mathematics, the basic principles of math as it pertains to the business environment. I've also taught, and I keep hearing the also piece here because I want to put all these out first, the communications course. Now, every manager, no matter where you are, should understand some basic communication skills. One, presentation, which you get to critique and evaluate me. But another, even more important, is writing. The ability to put something down in writing and pass it on to someone who may not see you as you can see me and be able to understand exactly what I'm talking about. So I've taught that course as well. And then back to one of my graduate level courses where I teach this management of strategic diversity, where we sometimes forget that in the entire arena of management, that there are a lot of obstacles out there, and one of the biggest obstacles to deal with is diversity. If you couldn't see me, you'd have to make some assumptions. Am I black? Am I white? Am I male? Am I female? You know, names can give away, voice tones may give away some of that as well. But those things always, we call it interferences in the overall communications process. So some of that I've dealt with as well, and I'm going to try and be not as interfering in terms of who I am and all as I talk about some of the things that are there. And if I was to move on to tell you just some real life experiences, I spent 32 years in the military, my Air Force career. During that time, I went from enlisted to officer. I probably took every course they put out in terms of talking about budgeting, management, and those kinds of things. So not only did I get the credentials from a formal side of the house, but I also had some real world experiences where it involved the lives of men and women that I served with and that served me. And I was very proud to say that I spent my 32 years very successfully, had some tragedies along the way, but that's in any job such as the military. But I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about management, I've learned a lot about people, and I've learned a lot about America. And those things are very important to me. And talking about learning a lot about America, I've also learned a lot about the world. Recently, I just returned from the Philippines. I had a trip over there where I do some ministry. Yes, I do ministry as well. I'm actually an advisor, a senior advisor for a couple of international churches where I'm really doing what I'm doing with you right now. I'm talking about leaders, about managing, about the controlling aspect of things, about how do you get things moving in that arena, and we're talking about a church environment, to make them successful. Not just making money, but also keeping up their constituents, being able to meet the needs of the people who they believe they should serve. And so I spent about 2 weeks over there and recently came back from that, and have a couple other trips planned in different places. Had an opportunity to visit China and talk with their education administrators, which was excellent. Been all through Latin America, and sí, yo hablo poquito español, no mucho. I do speak Spanish and have an opportunity to do some education in that arena as well. I guess you say I've bounced all over the place, but part of it to me, the world is a place to really experience management at its best, all over. Now, I don't necessarily say the best managers, but I'm saying management at its best. And I love teaching this because I can bring some real world experiences to it. Now, that's who I am. I'm going to transition from there and get into why I was asked to do this. Not just because of my background, but also because I believe I have something to offer to you as an entrepreneur in a rural environment. And when I talk about rural environment, the question comes in, is there a difference in what happens in the rural environment and what happens in a non-rural environment? Is there a difference? Now, that's rhetorical. I don't need a response back to that just yet. But I want you to think about that. Because the label for my particular area I'm talking about is the universality. That's how it's pronounced. The universalism or the universality or the universalism of management. And if that term is used in the word universal, meaning it exists everywhere, then that means that management exists whether you're rural, urban, entrepreneur, or non-entrepreneur. And I want to talk about that and motivate you perhaps to do a little bit that will allow you to be more effective and efficient at what you're doing. And I want you to remember those two terms, because as I go through, if I can make you effective, there's nothing wrong with that, right? That means that if you're effective, that you're going to hit the target every time. But if you hit the target and you use all your resources, then you're not going to be efficient. And so as I talk about this business of management, I want you to keep in your thought process that there are limited resources. And because they're limited resources, we want to make you both effective and efficient. We want you to hit the target all the time, and we want you to do it with the least amount of resources, because then you maximize the amount of income or return from that perspective. Let me do something first and deal with this issue of management historically, very, very briefly. I'm not going to get academic like I'm in a classroom. I realize I've got some adult learners out there. I've got some folks who perhaps got more knowledge than me on some of these topics. So I just want to frame it and get you thinking about it. You know, management, as we look back, we can go back to the days of the early Chinese dynasty, and we see there's some management taking place. But in terms of formalizing management and the principles that I'm going to talk about, we would probably start somewhere around the 1700s, looking at a guy by the name of Adam Smith. And if you ever can get your hands on this document, it's called Wealth of a Nation. Because that document began to talk about, how the division of labor should be. In other words, we're looking at now, not just meeting the goal, but being efficient about meeting the goal, compartmentalizing it, having divisions of labor. And then if I would leave from the 1700s, I would jump all the way to the 1900s, where I really see the development of management as we know it today. And the names, I could put plenty of names in that, but I would rather give you another label that you're probably familiar with. It's called the Industrial Revolution. It changed the way we saw leadership, management, and all those other things. And so now there's another period, the 20th century. It's called technology. Now, they've always been technology, but this technology is different. It is a virtual type of thing. It's an internet, it's a cloud, those things. So if you take those three major pieces, as we look at this issue of management, the question will come in, can I do management in a rural area? Ask yourself this question. Do you have any kind of technology out there? Now, don't just think of computers, because, whether it's a tractor or whether it's some other type of machinery out there, you've got some kind of technology. Okay, and whether it's a car or a truck to get things to the market. And I'm speaking more agrarian when I talk those things. But as we know, just because we say a rule, it doesn't mean that you're missing some of the things that folks in urban society have. What you're missing, perhaps, is some of the hustle and bustle and the rat race of the noises. And that might not be bad. But I want you to start thinking that just because you're in a rural environment doesn't make you any different from the urban environment in terms of being able to be effective and efficient in what you need to do. You may have to do some additional planning, some additional calculating, changing some timelines and all, but still very possible. So I wanted to get that out first to say that I'm going to talk like I'm talking to everyone, because I don't really see a great difference in being rural versus urban as we understand the concepts of management. They're needed. And that's why I labeled this the universality of management, the universalism of it. So the first question that will come up is that, what is management? Wow. That's like asking, what is a leader? Are they born or are they made? Now, we can argue all day, and we still, there are books and volumes of trying to decide whether leaders are born or whether leaders are made. In reality, maybe they're neither one of those, or maybe they're both of those, or all of those. In real honesty, I don't really care whether leaders are born or leaders are made. I'm interested in what leaders do. And it's the same with management. What do managers do? That will identify them. Once I know what they do, I can look out and see that person is doing it, their manager. But for the sake of being somewhat academic, and I had to give you a definition, let's use this as an unorthodox type of definition to say that management is influencing others to do things, and that's the leadership role of it. So maybe I should back up a little bit, say, and as I look at management, management is the ability to get things done by planning, controlling, leading, and organizing, and not necessarily in that order. So if you do planning, if you do any kind of planning whatsoever, if you do any kind of leadership whatsoever, any kind of organizing whatsoever, and any kind of controlling whatsoever, you're probably doing managerial functions. And so in a short statement, management is planning, organizing, leading, and controlling people, places, and things. Not going to say nouns, because you probably a little bit better from our K through 12 thing, where we talk about people, places, or things. That's a noun. So therefore, that's what managers do. Managers will either plan people, places, or things with them. They're going to either organize people, places, or things. They're going to either lead people, places, or things, or they're going to control people, places, or things. That's a simplistic definition, a simplistic description of management and what managers do. And that's what I'm interested in. What do you do? So when you think about that, and I say management is a universal issue. The universality of it, meaning that everybody manages at every single level of life. Now, I may get questioned about, well, what about a baby? How can they manage? You got to be a certain age to manage. Perhaps you do have to be a certain age to manage, but the reality of it is that even at that age, there are some managerial functions taking place. And I'd like to go back to thinking of my kids, of which I have 4, but as babies, they influence what we did. Oh yeah, they managed, they controlled a lot of things, whether we want to admit that or not. They didn't always plan, so they didn't do all of the functions, but they definitely led some things and controlled some things. I mean, when they cry, we responded. We served them. You know, so they had some schedules that they set up that wasn't ours. That's what managers do as well. They had some resources that they produced that we weren't always happy with, but we work with that. I don't know, I'm getting very elementary with that piece there, but what I'm trying to get you to see that managers exist at all levels. Organizations do not exist without managers. And the key here is not whether or not there's a manager there, is whether or not that manager is going to be effective and efficient in the processes that they're working. And that's what we're going to get to as we go along here. And is it important? You bet it is. Is there a crisis?